let's collaborate where we can and work together where we can and learn how to coexist where we can't.
It's always been really fun for me to have conversations with people who do politics for a living. I say do because politics can sometimes be an act more than anything else, and no one seems to understand that better than today's guest. Hey everyone, it's Rhoda, and I'm so happy to be back with you for episode 153 of the Assyrian podcast. After nearly 2 years, I had the opportunity to finally record an in-person interview with our guest for this week, Steve Oshana. I was slated to make a trip out to DC in March of 2020 to meet with a group of Assyrians and interview a few of them for the podcast. Well, the universe had other plans for March of 2020, and although I hope to make it out there to DC sooner than later, I'm glad I was able to find some time with Steve while he was in Detroit for a wedding. Steve is the executive director of A Demand for Action, which is an advocacy group that works for the protection of Assyrians and other minorities in Iraq and Syria. By day, Steve is a political consultant or lobbyist working in Washington, D.C. In this episode, we had a chance to talk about politics, what lobbyists do, and how Steve finds common ground with politicians he rarely agrees with on most issues. Steve makes no qualms about his party allegiances. After all, he is a part of the Democratic National Committee. But hearing him talk about his motto and what matters most when it comes to his work was interesting. He is sarcastic and doesn't shy away from cynicism, but I also think he is hopeful and earnest in his desire to make an impact. I also really liked hearing his story about how he came into politics as a teenager and his connections with Chicago politicians like Reverend Jesse Jackson and Barack Obama. Before we get to the interview, support for this week's episode of the Assyrian podcast is brought to you by Tony Kalogerakos and the Injury Lawyers of Illinois and New York. If you know anyone that's been in a serious accident, please reach out to Tony Kalogerakos. Tony has been recognized as a top 40 lawyer and a rising star by Super Lawyers publication and has obtained multiple multi-million-dollar awards. Tony can be reached at injuryrights.com or 847-982-9516. This episode is also sponsored by the Oshana Partners, a husband and wife real estate team. Are you considering purchasing or selling a home in Arizona or California? Well, John and Rita are available to help make your next real estate decision into a seamless transaction. Contact the Oshanas at 209-968-9519. Get to know them a bit more by checking out their website, theoshanapartners.com. And now, here's today's guest, Steve Oshana. Steve, welcome to the Assyrian podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Washington, D.C. strikes me as the kind of place where a lot of people live, but not a lot of people are from. So, where are you from?
So I was born and raised in Illinois. I was born in Chicago, lived in Skokie, and then during college and undergrad, I lived back in the city. So Illinois, Chicago kind of area of most of my adult life. I came to DC just immediately after undergrad, and I've been there ever since. It's going to be 13 years, next week.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been a long time.
How did your parents end up in Chicago?
My parents are both, Iraqi immigrants. They came here from Iraq. They got married in Illinois. Like most Assyrians, I think they just kind of ended up there because that's where Assyrians were going, because that's where the factory jobs were. So yeah, that's kind of how we ended up there.
What did you study in undergrad?
Economics and sociology.
Okay. Yeah. Tell me what prompted your move to DC in 2008?
So I had, shortly before moving to DC, started getting involved with Assyrian activism. And there was although my activism prior was never with Assyrians, when I was a young activist, I did mostly civil rights activism in the Black community. And so, I got sort of pulled into Assyrian activism because an Assyrian organization needed help with a congressman from the South Side who I had a relationship with, Jesse Jackson Jr. And so they kind of asked me if I could help them sort of with a relationship with him on some stuff they were working on. And after that, they're like, hey, like, you got to come do this. And they formed an organization and brought me out there to work. The organization ran out of money, a few months in, and I just kind of stuck around and kept doing it. And yeah, that's kind of how we ended up here.
What led to your activism in the Black community in Chicago?
I was working at a restaurant when I was I don't know, maybe 16. And one of the guys who was a host there, it was an older guy. We were just talking about, inequality and my desire to sort of, address issues like income inequality and access to education. And he's like, you got to come to Rainbow Push, which is Jesse Jackson Senior's organization. And he's like, just come hear the message. And, I went down the 50th and Drexel on the South Side, and I listened to Jesse Jackson preach, and I was floored by the guy. And I just started volunteering with them, and I ended up marching with Reverend Jackson in Bronzeville once, protesting tax rate hikes in the Bronzeville neighborhood. We were protesting the Cook County assessor at the time, David Orr. They were raising taxes to basically pushing people out of their homes, and so Rainbow Push was very involved in that. That was kind of how that activism started.
What are some of the things you would say you learned from that period in your life that you've carried with you in Assyrian activism and activism beyond that?
To me, the most important thing is how just critical coalitions are, and working together, and it's not just about Assyrians. It's not just about, it can't just be the Black community for the Black community and the Assyrian community for the Assyrian community. We're so intertwined. And one of the most, just kind of how I got involved with the Assyrians, like I said, was Jesse Jackson Jr. was an appropriator. He was on the appropriations committee. There was an Assyrian organization working on appropriations to get money to the Nineveh plain. They weren't able to get it through committee because they just didn't have the votes. And the chairman of this committee was Jesse Jackson Jr. of the subcommittee, and he wasn't talking to them. They'd reach out, nothing, no return phone calls. They couldn't get a staff meeting, and they came to me and they're like, you have a relationship with this guy, we need your help. And I said, sure. I set up a meeting with the legislative director, flew into DC. A couple weeks later, committee vote came up, him and Mark Kirk kind of talked, shook hands, deal was done, appropriations went through. And years later, this was and Jesse had some legal issues, as most of us know. And I ran into his legislative director at the time and kind of asked him, why did Jesse help us? He had no Assyrian constituents. He knows nothing really about the Nineveh plain. This is just not his fight. And he said, because you marched with his father. And, when I marched with Reverend Jackson, it wasn't I was a teenager just wanting to do that. I didn't think okay, this was going to be a relationship that helped years down the line. But that line, because you marched, was you stood with us when you had no real reason to, other than you cared, and that for me, that was just such an important lesson of we have to be working with other communities. We have to, and it can't be because we expect something in return. It just, you do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And, that's how progress happens.
I'm reminded, have you watched Judas and the Black Messiah?
I have not, no.
I am reminded of the Black Panthers at some point involving other communities other than Black communities, and that's kind of how their strength came about and why they became very dangerous. Yeah,
I was too young, for the Panthers. In my heart, I wanted to be a Panther so bad. I would have totally been a Panther. I think. I loved what they had to say in a lot of ways.
I highly recommend the movie.
Yeah,
it's a good one. So you moved to DC to do this work.
Yeah.
And then you stuck around.
Yeah, I like the city. I at one point I wanted to get out of politics and I wanted to work in restaurants because my dream career was never political. I wanted to be a chef. But then
quite a departure.
Yeah, I really wanted to be a chef, and then it turned out it was way too hard. And so I'm like, politics is easy here. Like, I just sit around being like, you should say this when you're on CNN, and working in a restaurant is hard work. Like, I'm too soft for that. But yeah, so I stuck around in the city, and I had gotten out of politics, and then I kind of got pulled back into it in 2014 after ISIS invaded Mosul, and there was, I kind of got asked again to come back and help the community out. So that's kind of how I got back into it, and yeah, so here we are.
What's your day job these days?
I'm a political consultant. I do government affairs consulting, so with campaigns and candidates, with companies to help them manage their relationships with the government, on public policy and how it affects their companies, how it affects their issues. I'm as someone reminds me on Facebook at least once a month, I'm a hack. So yeah,
a political hack.
I'm a political hack. What are you gonna do?
We were talking about the work of lobbyists, and I said to you that my 2 reference points are oil tycoons and pharmaceuticals, and then Sidney Ellen Wade from The American President, which is one of my favorite movies. And I'm sure that truth, or the bulk of it, lies somewhere in the middle.
I've never represented an oil company. I've considered because my main sort of focus is Assyrian activism. I only sort of take clients that I don't feel I feel okay with. I've considered like going full villain and like being like a tobacco lobbyist or something. I like the idea of just like being like the villain lobbyist. I think it's kind of fun, but I haven't had the heart to do it. But yeah, it's not, it's interesting. Like, I don't, it's not quite as like sexy as it is on TV or in the movies. A lot of it's just, like arguing with committee staff over whether there should be a semicolon or a colon here. Or is it a comma? Is it like, how do you break up this whereas clause with this heretofore clause? Like, it's a whole, it's very like kind of wonky, and a lot of it's like relationship based. So like, you probably spend more time like building relationships than you do talking about policy. And, because at the end of the day, no one's going to want to work with you if they don't like you. So it's a very kind of like chummy, like, people like job. So it's just a lot of, developing relationships. So there's not like many, like dramatic moments. I mean, there are like, there have been like some, when people recall like their House of Cards show or whatever they're watching, they're like, is it like this? I'm like, like there are moments where it's like really like All the President's Men, like sexy, but they're few and far between. But there have been a couple of those moments where like I felt like really good about myself because I did something cool, and it was, there was like a moment, but most of it's just kind of, wonky legislative stuff.
How do you decide what clients to take? You said, you don't want to feel conflicted about them. So like,
yeah. I mean, it's sort of my red lines. So like, there's like I will never represent a country that oppresses my people. Like no Iran, no Iraq, no Saudi Arabia, really people who fund terrorism, no oil countries, no Kurds, obviously, like no KRG. Like I'll never represent anything like Azerbaijan, that kind of stuff, Turkey, out of the question, 100%. No oil companies, only because of the sort of impact that oil exploration in the Middle East has had on Assyrians. I just think it's too negative. Aside from that, I'm not, it's just sort of like whether I can help them or not. A lot of times, normally the way you sort of end up in front of a client is because you could help them. So like, the people who I don't want to represent probably have never approached me. Like tobacco has never approached me. Although a couple of like bad people have approached me, who I had no interest in working with. And, I've said some mean things and walked out of some meetings and like, are you kidding me? Like, you actually think I'm going to represent you? And kind of a thing. But yeah, that's kind of how we end up with it.
You said a lot of your work is like arguing with like legislative staff about you know, certain wording and things like that. What does a typical day look like for you? Is there a typical day?
Yeah, there's no typical day. I mean, during COVID, it's been a lot of like, you know, taking calls from the couch, like, you know, slamming LaCroix and just like throwing the cans across the room when I feel good about myself. But you normally you'll have meetings in the Hill. You'll be talking depending on what issues I'm working on for whom. I'd say the Assyrian stuff takes up like 80% of my time, so mostly it's Assyrian stuff. A lot of meetings with staff, just like briefing them on issues, talking about what legislation is coming up at that point. So like around the appropriations time, we do that. When defense bill's coming up, when the NDAA is coming up, there's a lot of conversations about that. And then there's like a lot of like, little luncheons and happy hours and stuff just to like
make connections,
fundraisers, maintain the relationships. It's a lot of relationships, again, like there's, as I remind people, like Assyrians have basically no power in the literal sense. We're not a huge voting bloc on the congressional level. And so like a lot of what we're able to do, we're just able to do because of relationships that we have. And, the guys that like, and women who are like, worked as interns when I was like 23, like we all kind of went up through the ranks and, they're like running congressional offices, or they might be some of them are in Congress now. If people don't like you, they're not going to work with you. This idea of like the genius who's a jerk, like nobody cares. No one cares how smart you are. If you're a jerk, no one's going to talk to you. And we've seen that happen with Assyrians a lot. Like a lot of really smart Assyrians will come to try to like do their thing in DC and like talk to policymakers, but they're just really abrasive, or like they don't like fit in with the culture, and they just they can't get it done. And it's all about relationships.
One of my favorite things to think about and talk about is identities, and as an Assyrian, the different identities that we oftentimes straddle. You said something to me the other day about how your identity as a progressive in terms of U.S. politics and the work that you do with Christians in the Middle East allows you to straddle two very different spaces oftentimes, because usually the people who work on behalf of Christians tend to be more conservative, and you might not agree with them on abortion. U.S. politics.
Right, on abortion.
Sure. But that you still work with them to move your agenda forward. How do you think those two parts of your identity have been an advantage to you?
I think it's like, for me, the biggest advantage has been like being able to bridge gaps where gaps exist. Like one of our really close friends on the Hill is Ted Cruz, who's, a guy who like
I'm shocked.
Right. Most people are. And it's weird because like I'm like good friends with his staff, and like I've like known them before I did this. And like I said, it's so like just personal. Like we're friends. And like if I have an issue that I can work with Ted on, with Senator Cruz, like, why shouldn't we get that win where we can? But like so in some cases, like I've gotten like Ted Cruz and Dick Durbin to work on stuff together, like on Assyrians' behalf. And a lot of people are kind of surprised to see their names in the same letters. And my motto, like for my like just MO for life in general, and especially for political work, is let's collaborate where we can and work together where we can, and learn how to coexist where we can't. And we don't have to like each other, we don't have to agree on everything, but like even someone who like I have a serious issue with like most of what he stands for, if he's supporting Assyrians and Christians in the Middle East, then why wouldn't I work with him on those things? And in some cases it creates conflicts. Like, like I'm part of the DNC, and the DNC is ethnic council, and there'll be Democrats running against Ted Cruz, who I'm sort of expected to support, but I don't go against Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz helped me out a lot of times. He helped Assyrians out a lot of times when he really didn't have to. I won't campaign. I mean, if you like look at my social, like I'll criticize Mitch McConnell or anyone else. I've never said anything bad about Senator Cruz, because I feel like I owe him that courtesy for what he's done for us.
That's super interesting to me, because that's not the culture that I feel like as an outsider can see existing in DC.
Oh, in DC it's fine. It's funny, like, it's really crazy. Like when I see like the only people who I ever argue with are Assyrians. And it's like Assyrians on Facebook who like live in Skokie or in suburban Detroit or like in Washington, like we're adversaries, but we're friends. It's not like, it's just business. It's like, we run campaigns against each other. We have opposing politics and we fight and at the end of the day, like it's over, we hang out and shoot the breeze. It's not like it's such a like the polarization, like you see it. I think a lot of it is dramatic for like they do it to like build up the drama, and there is like there are some people who are just like legitimately like evil and bad and like, but like just staff is fine. Like they're just they're people my age and we're kind of we just talk and disagree. It's not, but also like DC is like a very like wonky city, so like a lot of the conservatives in DC are like what I would call real conservatives, like the Lockean, like what you would call classical liberals, right? And I don't mean liberal like in the progressive sense, but like the classical liberal. Like we can like their conservatism is driven by like ideas of like Tocqueville and Locke, and I can connect with that because that's a legitimate political philosophy, and like I don't agree with it necessarily, but I see the validity of it. I see the validity of like true conservatism, and I think it has some merits, and there are some very positive things it's done. But like what you see in like somewhere like out in Wisconsin, like those conservatives, I don't think are like real conservatives. I just they like big government when conservatism is supposed to be about small government, right? They like big government when it's controlling women's bodies, controlling like who marries whom, but then they say like we don't like the government, so it's like if you're gonna be like the idea of small government I think is a legitimate concept, but you have to like think about, well, what does that mean? Is like, does it is telling people what they can do with their bodies or who they can marry when they're consenting adults, is that limited government? And so for me, like I can get along with like conservatives very easily because I think it's a legitimate ideology. But what we see in the country amongst like people who are like think Obama's a Muslim, like that's not conservative. That's just lunacy.
I think though what ultimately gives people who don't live in DC and don't know these people personally, the idea that they should oppose other people who don't agree with them is like the kind of behavior we sometimes see from politicians who do nothing but talk smack about each other on Twitter or on the floor of the House or something. Yeah. And so it feels like they are kind of stoking the flames, getting people riled up, and then when the day's over they're gonna go have drinks, but the people at home are gonna continue to think of others as their enemies, if you will. Yeah,
there's a lot of truth to that. And I didn't, because like I guess for me, like I don't see it as hate. Like I can't hate someone because they want a smaller government. Like I'd like a smaller government in a lot of ways too. So it's like I don't hate someone for believing something. I could disagree with what they believe in. I could potentially hate what they believe in. It doesn't necessarily make them bad people. There's a movie called Primal Fear with Richard Gere and Ed Norton, where Ed Norton's like pretending to be this like stuttering guy, and he's accused of like killing someone. There's this great scene where Richard Gere's like at a bar, and they're asking him like, why do you defend these murderers? Like you're getting murderers off the hook, and you're helping horrible people. And he's like, why do you think I do it? He's like, do you think it's because of the money? He goes, no, but the money's great. And you think it's because of the women? He's like, no, but that's pretty awesome too. He's like, I do it because not all people who do bad things are bad people. And that stuck with me since I was a kid, this idea that like there are good people who maybe believe things that I think are bad, right? Like I think denying someone the right to choose what to do with their body is bad. I think it's kind of an evil concept to say like two consenting adults shouldn't be able to enter into a marriage contract. I think that's kind of an evil concept to say that that's wrong. I mean, it's illegal. You're basically denying constitutional rights to people because of who they love. And I think that's kind of crazy, because we did that in the form of slavery. We did that in the form, we redlined neighborhoods, and we have a history of denying Americans constitutional rights based on kind of arbitrary things. I think that's an evil idea. It doesn't mean that every person who doesn't believe in gay marriage, or not that it's something for you to believe or not believe in, it's a legal matter, but someone who thinks it's wrong, I don't think that makes them an evil person. I don't have to hate that person. These are just people that are products of their environment. Maybe they grew up in a certain way, and they grew up in like a small town, or they didn't they haven't been exposed to a lot. And I noticed it like when I'm in like Michigan and stuff, like I'll meet people who've like never left the state. Your view on the world is going to be a little more narrow. I don't think they're bad people. I actually think they're good people. They just, this is sort of how they interact with their environment. So I don't think you need to hate anybody. I just, and even like I get attacked by Assyrians all the time. And it's funny because it's only Assyrians who criticize me and give me a hard time. Never anybody else. And I'm, and like I'll see these guys who are like just argue with me endlessly and like call me terrible things, and like see them at a wedding and we'll hug, and it's like, and they'll like, sometimes people will apologize. I'm like, man, I was sorry. I kind of lost my temper on that. And I said some things that were, I'm like, bro, it's not that serious. Like, it's just, to me, like, politics is a sport. You get in there, you break a sweat, you rough each other up a little bit, and then you hit the showers and you call it a day.
We have a friend who says her dad's saying was that politics is a rich man's sport.
I don't know about. I think that is a. It's happened that way for a lot of reasons, but more and more, no. I mean, even like, it was never, American democracy was not meant to be aristocratic. Obviously, it was limited to like, landowners and other folks, and it was discriminatory in like horrible ways. But especially as time has gone on, now you have just a really kind of amazing, like, you're getting a lot more diversity in elected politics. But then, it's expensive to run campaigns. It's working in DC is hard because it's a hilariously expensive city to live in. And like the internships pay like nothing. And so, you need to be supported by someone typically, or like in my case, like, I worked 2 jobs when I was 23 and in DC. Like I had a day job, I waited tables or tended bar at night or something, and put yourself through college. When you're doing like that, it's a lot harder to do it. It makes it easier. I mean, to be fair, making money makes a lot of things easier. There are some like remnants of it being a rich man's game, and I specifically remember like when I remember like a few years ago, maybe 5-6 years ago. So when I worked in the restaurant industry, I worked in the bar, in the bar world, and I would like make these like fancy cocktails, and like magazines and stuff would like write about my cocktails, and like I would be on TV like talking about this, and an Assyrian guy like made fun of me. He like posted a picture of like me like from the Washingtonian magazine, like pouring a drink and saying like, oh, like Steve's a successful bartender in DC, and like he's qualified to lobby on our behalf, like really in like a mocking way. My response to that was, aside from it being ridiculous, like I kind of was like, you guys are supposed to be the party who calls us elitists. You should be glad that like we live in a country where someone who tended bar 5 years ago can be a lobbyist, right? And I saw a parallel with that with like AOC, with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So Sandy, when she ran for Congress, like people made fun of her. Like they made fun of her because she was a bartender. And this was around the same time that this guy was like making fun of me. And I'm like, hey man, like, it looks like I might be your congressman at some point too. Like just kind of jokingly to him. They call us like Ivy League elitists. But then like when a bartender runs for Congress, they make fun of them because they're a bartender. You can't have it both ways, right? So there are some remnants of that. But it's a free country. Like I came from, a very working class family. Like I went to school in the Pell Grants, and like we didn't have anything, and it's a free country. The doors of Washington are open. It's a government of the people for a reason. It's only inaccessible to you if you decide that it's inaccessible to you.
I think the other thing that kind of reminds me of is I feel like nowadays all kinds of people have very political opinions on things that they didn't before, which as much as I might not agree with their political opinions, I think it's fine for people to be more civically engaged in some ways.
Yeah, even if it's a little crazy. I mean, like, there's like some stuff. I mean, I see some stuff, especially because I have like a lot of Assyrian like friends on social media, and like I see some crazy stuff, like conspiracy theories, and some of it's like weird, but I'm like, you know what, it's like, it's awesome that you're sort of, you care enough and you're in tune enough that you're like, you have a feeling that you're willing to like go online and be like, Barack Obama is a secret Muslim, I know this is a fact. And it's like, obviously it's ridiculous, but it's, people need to be engaged. There is this like idea that like we're like, ruled by a ruling class. It's only that way if you choose to have it that way. And that's kind of why I got involved in politics in the first place. Was, like I grew up in the Assyrian community where my parents and our parents, they were victims of their government, right? The government was there to oppress them. The government was a thing that you were scared of. Huchma is something you're scared of. Assyrians were always just so powerless, and like everything happened to us. Anytime something happened, like we were at the mercy of the system. And I just like, as a kid, I'm like, I will not be a victim of a government. Like these people work for us. We vote for them, and I'm gonna be part of this in one way or another. And so it's great that people get involved, even if I don't like what they have to say, even if I think they're crazy. You know what? Then if you think that's a bad message, come bring a better message. If you don't like the person in office, find someone to run against them. Run against them yourself. My cousin just unseated an 18-year incumbent because she thought she can do a better job, and she did it. She ran and she won. Like I don't know. I think you got to do it. It's your government. So
yeah, I feel like we could talk about politics all day, because as much as some people say I don't like politics, I'm all about how the sausage gets made, because I think politics is policy, and policy is what impacts our day-to-day life. And if we don't care about that, then we are choosing not to have a say in how our life is.
Yeah.
Right?
I have that conversation with my family all the time. They're like, it doesn't affect my life who's in office. I'm like, well, it kind of does. Like, if you're part of a union and you get weekends off, like that happened because someone voted that into existence. And, but yeah, I could talk about politics all day. I'm happy to talk about other stuff.
Let's talk a little bit about A Demand for Action.
Sure.
You're currently the executive director.
Correct.
And I think I saw that it was created in 2014. Is that right?
Yeah. So it was created as sort of a response to the ISIS invasion of Mosul. Nuri Kino, our founder and president, put a post online kind of just saying like, I need 10 people who are willing to tweet and talk about what's happening because the media is silent about this. And a group got together, and then I got connected with them like a couple months later. And that's kind of how we became A Demand for Action.
This is something I wonder about any organization, but especially Assyrian philanthropic or political ones. What did you all thought was missing from currently existing organizations that you decided to start A Demand for Action?
I don't want to denigrate any organizations. I think there's room for every voice in our community. At a very basic level, like we didn't really, I don't know, it's funny, like we didn't start A Demand for Action, like it just kind of got started around us. It was just a very organic, as I would say, spontaneously combusted. It was like the Big Bang. And Demand for Action was like what came out of the subatomic particles. We had never had a presence in Washington with like a professional lobbyist. That wasn't something that was ever really there in a meaningful way, in a consistent way. People that were like products of DC, but the politics is a very small part of what A Demand for Action does. It seems like it's outweigh like the bigger part, but we do a lot of humanitarian work. We raise a lot of money for charitable work, for helping refugees in Lebanon and Syria and Iraq. We do a lot of our work is humanitarian, and so the policy is one part of it.
I like Shakespeare plays, but where I draw the line is where Juliet tells Romeo, what's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Because I do think names are important.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about the name A Demand for Action. How did you all come up with that?
Oh, see, okay. I thought you were going to go into the whole Assyrian, Chaldean, Syriac thing.
Oh, no.
I had like a whole Capulets and Montagues thing ready to go. Like, I love quoting Shakespeare.
I'd be happy to talk about that too, but I was mostly curious about the name of the organization.
I had a Hamlet reference for you.
Ooh, I'd like to hear that.
It's all good. We'll get to Shakespeare. The name. I mean, the name was like literally people were asking like, what do you guys want? Like, we're just demanding action. Like, it wasn't like we didn't want like Assyrian to be in the name or Chaldean Syriac, because we didn't want to fight about like the names or the three names or this and that. And we're just like when we started, it was just like a bunch of people demanding action. And
what kind of action?
So before I came on board, like I'm a tactician. Nuri is like a more sort of he's more of a poet than I am. I think part of what what we were demanding were things like humanitarian aid, military support for Christians, Assyrian, Chaldean, Syriacs, and the Nineveh Plain in Syria. U.S. policy that supported the ambitions of our people. And so, those were the things that we were demanding. And, one of the unfortunate things, and I think going back to it now, it actually just kind of, the light bulb went off. When you talked about like what was missing in the Assyrian activism previously, it's the ask, it's the what are you demanding? Like I would take Assyrians, like, especially like older folks, into meetings, and they'd come in, they'd pound the table and like very emotionally and genuinely talk about how horrible everything is that's happening to them. And politicians would ask, so what do you want us to do? And they didn't have an answer for that. And to me, a demand for action was sort of the answer to that question. Like, what do you want us to do? And so like, for me, like I'm a lobbyist, and like I come in with what I want before I ever have the conversation about how bad things are. Like, I know what I want. I've already written the letter, the legislation, like, because like I know like, okay, this is the appropriations bill. This is how we need to like line item this. And so like I come into congressional offices. So like in my case, unless I'm bringing Assyrians in, like leaders and victims and things like that, I don't even talk about like the emotional stuff with these offices. Like I don't go to them and say like, it's so bad, please help us, please, you have to help us. I come in and say, hey, listen, this horrible thing is happening. Like, here's the legislation. It's already written. Let me know if the congressman is willing to support this. That's sort of my approach. Like, I don't like spend a lot of time talking about the emotional stuff of, how horrible things are, because they know it's on the news, which is another big part of what we do, is like getting media attention to what's going on in our community. So, I guess that's the long answer to what we're demanding. Although we get a lot of, it's funny, I ran into a woman from Moms Demand Action on Gun Violence, because I get their mail all the time. Like I get like emails of people be like, what are you doing about gun control? And I'm like, wrong group demanding action. And so like I ran into this woman from Moms Demand Action on Gun Control, and I'm like, I have your mail. I have so many emails of yours. I gotta give them to you. So.
That's hilarious. So let's talk about the name issue, though.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Interesting that you all decided not to include Assyrian Chaldean, because like you weren't interested in having that fight.
We had the fight anyway, but
tell me about that.
Everybody's mad about everything all the time. Like some people like say it only is Assyrians. It's stupid to say Chaldean Syriacs. A lot of Chaldeans, which most Assyrians are Chaldean, especially in Iraq. Like 80% of them are Chaldean, and it's debatable whether they identify as Assyrian or not. I don't. They kind of don't, but it's fine. They call themselves Sudai or whatever. It's just like, a lot of our volunteers were people who identified as Assyrian, who were what they would, you'd say were Assyrian nationalists. There was Chaldeans. There was a lot of Syriacs in Sweden, some of whom identified as Assyrian, some of whom identified as Syriac, some of whom whatever. And, my thought was, hey, they're all being beheaded. They're all being kidnapped. I really could care less what you call yourself. right now, like, there's a real problem that we have to address, and I really am not willing to like fight over the name. But everybody wanted to fight over the name, and the result was a lot of people left the organization very early on. Like, there was like a core group who like wanted us to be like a pro ADM thing, and we're not going to support any church or political party, or like we're kind of here for people who are suffering, whatever they call themselves. So there were people who left who were like, well, we don't like that you say Assyrian, Chaldean, Syriac, or we don't like that you mention Chaldeans, or we don't like that, you're not supporting this group or this party or this church, or we support, our people who are suffering. I don't care where they go to church. I don't care what their denomination is. That's our thing. We use the name Assyrian, Chaldean, Syriac with the slashes because I think that most people could live with that, right? You have like the people that are more extreme Assyrians who are like Assyrian only, Chaldeans fake, this is whatever, and it may or may not be whatever, I don't know. But there is the 10% of people who are there. There's the 10% of Chaldeans who are like, no, you can't use Assyrian, we are Chaldean, we are the Ur of the Chaldees. And those people we can't satisfy. But I'd say like 70% of people. Then there's the Aramaeans who are like a different set of ideas, and there are the people who are on those fringes who are like, we can't accept anything but our position, 100% or nothing. And then there are most people who are like, all right, I could live with Assyrian, Chaldean, Syriac. I'm personally one of those people who could live with Assyrian, Chaldean, Syriac. Some people can't. We get criticized constantly, and people are like, you're not an Assyrian organization. And I'm like, you know what? We're not an Assyrian organization in that sense. Like, if your idea of an Assyrian organization is like to be like militantly like arguing over a name when people are like hurting and we have an opportunity to help them, then no, maybe we're not an Assyrian organization on your part. Like we support policies that help, Yazidis and other people too. So yeah, we're not super militant about it. We just wanted to find a way to say it where it just didn't become a fight. It was a fight. And occasionally people still argue with us and say like, you're not an Assyrian organization. I'm like, cool, bro. What else you got?
I often think, nobody and no organization is Nutella or pizza. Not everybody's going to like you. So.
Yeah. And there's some people that don't like Nutella. I don't know.
Those people do not exist.
I know. So put it in a crepe. It's so good. I mean, who was it?
It's just good out of the jar with the spoon.
I know. Yeah. Those people. Those are the people I hate. Like I said, I don't hate anyone. I do hate those people.
What are some things you consider the biggest accomplishments of a demand for action?
I mean, for me, I think our biggest accomplishment was our ability to sort of put together a coalition of people who got the word out about what was happening, at a time when nobody wanted to talk about what was happening to Assyrians. Like, we were in the New York Times, we were on CNN, our message got out there, and it got out there because of a lot of people who came together, who put aside differences, who put aside name issues, who put aside church issues, who were just like, hey, let's do this. I mean, to me, that's like the biggest accomplishment, was that, we brought people together. We brought a lot of new people into it. I'd say more than half of our volunteers are people who have never volunteered for an Assyrian organization. 70% of our board are women. We have LGBTQ supporters, and I'm very, very proud of sort of how modern and our organization was in that sense. Politically, we had a really heavy lift when we did an amendment for the National Defense Authorization Act.
What's that?
So that's basically the annual military bill to put it as simply as possible. It's the bill that authorizes all military spending. And we were able to amend that with the support of then Armed Services Chairman Carl Levin, who unfortunately recently passed away, God rest his soul. And we were able to amend that to include language that authorized support for Assyrian, security forces in the Nineveh Plain. And so, that was the first time that something like that had, ended up in legislation like that, in sort of that capacity. It was a really big deal. It didn't help as much as we would have hoped it did in the end, but it did. And
what kind of impact did it have on the ground?
I think, in the broadest sense, it started the process of the U.S. military looking at Christian Assyrian security forces as a group that they're now able to support. Whereas before there was no mechanism to support them, now there was. To put it in perspective, defense contractors and stuff they spend millions and millions of dollars a year on amendments like this. It's a big lift. I mean, it's a really big lift. And I was very, that was really early on in our tenure, and I was very sort of, glad we were able to do that. And I think that was a big deal. That was kind of the first like big thing that we did. But yeah, so.
And when was this?
2015, FY15, okay. NDAA.
Is Carl Levin a Michigander?
He is a Michigander.
Okay.
He's a senator from Michigan.
That's what I thought.
Senator from Michigan. He was the chairman of the Armed Services Committee at the time. And
any relation to Andy Levin?
He's his uncle.
Okay.
So Carl's brother.
Andy Levin is my representative.
Your congressman?
Yep.
All right. Yeah. And Andy's a good guy. He helps us out a lot, and he's been good to the community in a lot of ways.
Nice. What has been your biggest challenge as an organization?
We're all volunteers. We don't have any like salaried staff. It's always funny because whenever it's like most people that I work with in Washington don't know that I have like another job. They just like think I'm like a full-time advocate for the demand for action, and I'm like, no, like we don't have staff or anything, and it's hard. It's like you have to like balancing all of this when everybody involved has like their own careers. They have their own trying to kind of make this like our de facto kind of full-time thing. I'd say, but the hardest part for me personally is like the emotional part of it, and it's something that I don't really talk about because I don't like to talk about it. But like like especially like at Khabur, when Khabur got when those Assyrians got kidnapped there, we'd get like lists of names of people who were kidnapped or who were killed, and like they look like us and they have our names, and it's like you see this 19-year-old and like he has the same name as your little cousin, and like that part of it's hard. Like dealing with that every day was really hard, and like that like emotional burden of that, particularly when we were working on the arms stuff. We did both support for Assyrian Christian forces in Syria and in Iraq, and we had a lot more luck in Syria. But there was a point where when we were pursuing this, and members of Congress and folks would ask us, if one of these young guys dies with a gun in his hand that you got in his hand because of the work you do, like how do you deal with that? Like that part of it's really hard. Like that part of it's like emotionally really hard, and it's kind of that's probably the hardest part, is when you fail them and there are consequences to that. Similar when Jimmy Al Dawood passed away, I took that really, really personally.
And this is, for our listeners who may not know, this was a man who was deported.
Yeah, so after Trump got elected, Jimmy was one of the people who ended up getting deported, and we worked on his case, trying to find like a third country for him to go to, and we had a solution at one point. Sorry, do you have a tissue or something?
Yes.
We had a solution where, we wanted to have him sent to Armenia instead of to Iraq, but the Trump administration said no, that they wouldn't make a request to send him to a third country. And when he died, I spent just like months with like sleepless nights, like going through emails, we went to everyone, we met with everybody, but you can't help but say, like, could he have done something else? Is there another person I could have talked to? Is there anything else? And, we had very, very high up relationships in the Trump administration. And as high up as we went, it just, it didn't happen. And when he passed away, that was really hard. I took that really personally. So yeah, there was actually an article about that in Politico. They did like a feature on that, and it was kind of cathartic in a sense to like be able to tell that story and like go back through my emails and like just see like, okay, I think we did everything we could have, but it's still, that's a tough one when someone dies like that, and they kind of look to you to help them. It's tough.
How many people were in the same boat as him in terms of like people from Metro Detroit who got deported?
A handful of people actually got deported. There was my colleagues and I worked, particularly my colleagues here, the Code Legal Aid, Nadine Kalasha, who's an attorney here, and her siblings. We all, we worked with the ACLU on a lawsuit that sort of halted the deportation so people could reopen their cases. Some people ended up getting deported back. Jimmy was the only one who died, but there was a number of people who ended up going back voluntarily because they just didn't want to fight anymore. But some people ended up getting their cases reopened and winning. Some people lost. It was kind of a mixed bag. And
for context, correct me if I'm wrong, but these were folks who basically were undocumented.
These were people who had come to the country legally, who for one reason or another had their green card revoked because they committed a crime or something. And
in some cases, like petty crimes, right?
Some of them were like DUIs or like speeding or something. At the end of the day, like some people had serious crimes, but at the end of the day, my feeling on it was, we have a legal system in this country, and if the punishment for your crime is death, the legal system should hand down that punishment. Like in Jimmy's case, the punishment that the legal system handed down was 6 months in jail and probation or something. If the state wanted him dead, they should have given him the death penalty. They have the option to do that, and they chose not to. And so, we thought that it was, the legal system played itself out. These people had sentences. They served their sentences. At that point, you're supposed to be rehabilitated, not punished again. And when he went back to, I know he eventually passed away, but how did that happen when he went back to Iraq? He ended up getting deported. They sent him to Najaf, which is like a Shia kind of stronghold. They wouldn't even send him to Baghdad for whatever reason. I think we ended up finding out is because there was no flight to Baghdad, so they sent him to a place where Christians are targeted. And yeah, he had sort of some psychological issues and mental disabilities, and he's diabetic and didn't have access to insulin and just ended up dying there. I can see why that would be hard. And I was going to ask you, actually, when I asked about the challenges, I was going to ask, are there times when you think we should have done more? But you talked about that in this case, but are there any other situations where you think, we should have done more? I don't know. Yes. The answer is always yes. When I say we, it's is it whose responsibility is it? Is it the collective community? Is it mine personally? I do everything I can. I think most of the time I probably do more than I should in a personal sense. I maybe you shouldn't be spending 80% of my time that I could be using building my career on Assyrian stuff. I don't know. I take it as you will. I think I do what I can. I help as many people as I can. We get a lot of requests for people that just have visa issues, and now a lot of people just come to me because their cousin's stuck in Iraq, or they need help with a visa, or there's some personal kind of issue like that, and we help anybody that we can. I mean, my general feeling is if an Assyrian is coming to me for help and I have the capacity to help them, I should. I don't feel any guilt. I mean, I don't feel guilt in the sense that in the broad sense that I'm being selfish or I could be doing more. On the individual cases, sometimes you don't win all the time, and in politics, especially if you're Assyrian, you win way less than you lose, and the losses kind of stick with you. Those I take a little more personally because it's someone or you got to know along the way, or you got to know their family, and it's just man, that stuff sucks. Yeah. That part of it sucks. You've talked a lot about coalitions from your work in Chicago with Reverend Jackson. You built a coalition in some way, but also coalition with other senators and stuff. I've also noticed that you work pretty closely with the Armenian community. We have an Armenian state rep that you seem to know here in Michigan, Mari Manoukian. Mari's awesome. Or just, you seem to be involved in with other Armenian things. Why do you think it's important to build those kinds of coalitions with people who have similar struggles to Assyrians? I mean, there's a million million reasons why we should have those coalitions. I think that the biggest one is particularly with Greeks and Armenians. We suffered in the same genocide. We all suffered in Safo. We live in a lot of the same places, and a lot of us, myself included, have Armenian blood. Like, I'm a quarter Armenian, so like I'm Armenian. Like, I care about Armenians because I'm Armenian, and I feel like sometimes Assyrian is the dominant gene, but nonetheless, those are groups. In the case of the Armenians and the ANCA in particular, like, they have a very sophisticated operation in DC, and for like years Assyrians had been trying to like build a relationship with them, and I just don't think Assyrians brought enough to the table politically to kind of like be partners. And so like when I came to that, Aram Hamparian, who's the executive director of the Armenian National Committee of America, and they're headquartered in DC, I met him when I came to DC. I was 23. He kind of mentored me in a lot of ways and really was supportive, but our relationship with them didn't really take off until 2014, when I was a much more, I don't want to say sophisticated, but I was a much more developed political professional by then, and I brought something to the table, and I could do heavy lifting on my own. And so like, there was a much more compelling reason for us to all kind of work together. And so we're like just locked tight with the Armenians and the Greeks, with the ANCA, and then with the Hellenic American Leadership Council, who's run by a guy named Andy Zemenides, who's like just one of the greatest people you'll ever meet. Brilliant guy, just a political machine in and of himself. And we're just, those guys are like my brothers. We're always in lockstep. There's no space between us. Like,
I've noticed that the Assyrian American Organization of Southern California has also been doing a lot of work with the Armenian community in LA, where most Armenians live.
Yeah, with the Western region there. Yeah, no, it's a great group. I like that group a lot. I'd actually introduced them to the Armenians, if I'm not mistaken. We had kind of made some connections for them. They were looking for some relationships in California and the West Coast, and I'm like, look, these are the only guys I like there in the political sense. So I'm like, this group, it's young people. They're doing things the right way. They're doing it locally. The ANCA Western region now is run by a guy named Armin Sahakian, who's a very dear friend who was here in DC, another just hilariously brilliant guy. Yeah, they do a good job. I like that group. They keep it local. They understand like how to build sort of local organizing. Good people. I'm just happy to see that relationship expand beyond me, because a lot of times like it's I don't want to be the only one sort of carrying that load. And so they're awesome dudes. Great people.
Let's talk about the Armenian genocide and how it was recognized officially by the U.S. government this year, right?
Yeah, legislation or the president's proclamation. Which one are we talking about?
We can talk about both.
Sure.
What do you think that meant to the Armenian community, and what is it that Assyrians could take away from that happening? Yeah.
So we were part of it. To me, I'm one of those folks who sees Armenian genocide as a proper noun. It's recognizing what happened to all of us. In the case of the legislation, we work with the Armenian National Committee on that legislation. The legislation actually, it mentioned Safo in the legislation. The genocide was recognized, for us sort of directly in the legislation that passed the Senate and the House. I think in the president's proclamation, it was a big deal. I think it was for us really important to sort of see our country recognizing the plight of our people historically. We had the Armenians helped us a lot when we were trying to get the ISIS genocide recognized, and so it was for us, it was really great to sort of be there for them too. There was some concern about the president not mentioning Assyrians in his proclamation. My conversations with the White House about that were basically the message I got from folks very high up in the administration was that this was something most people in the White House didn't want to do, but the person who wanted it recognized was Joe Biden. He was the one who was like, we're going to do this. And a lot of staff didn't want to do it. I wasn't going to be the person who sort of torpedoed the whole thing because I wanted to fight about the fact that they didn't mention Assyrians. We made our case of what it should reflect, and we didn't quite get what we wanted. I think next year I probably guess that we probably will. I think we're going to have sort of ability to do that in a more meaningful way. But yeah, like I'm Armenian, so like I'm not gonna make a fight about it with the White House to like torpedo something that's like for my people, because it didn't say exactly what I wanted it to. But it was it was a monumental moment. It was the U.S., standing up to Turkey, who is a horrible ally, if you can call them that. I mean, just the worst ally ever. And I think, it shows a shift in U.S. policy and is a reflection of the burgeoning strength of the Armenian American community.
That day, I thought of Samantha Power, because when I read The Education of an Idealist, she talked about how entirely devastated she was when President Obama didn't mention the Armenian genocide.
You and I both.
Yeah.
Her and I both.
Yeah.
Yeah. I told her she owes us an apology personally. Like, I want her to come apologize to me, but she hasn't done it just quite yet. But we'll see. Maybe next time I see her, I'll remind her. Say, you still owe me an apology personally. No, look, I was one of those people who just idolized Barack when he was a local politician, when he was a community organizer. I volunteered on his Senate campaign back in 2004. I met him in 2003.
How did you meet him?
So it's funny. I was sort of voluntold into politics by my late uncle Raman Oshana, who was just kind of a hero in our community and one of the most amazing people. But my uncle Raman, so the short version of it, my cousin Ninos, Raman's son, we went to high school together. He was a wrestler, and he had a wrestling meet one day, and Raman drove me to the match because I wasn't old enough to drive. And after the match, we went to like an Assyrian club, like the Assyrian Social Club, and Raman had invited an alderman named Joe Moore, who was an alderman in the 49th Ward. And my uncle, in his like kind of brooding way, he goes, "Steve, you're going to volunteer for Joe." And I'm like, "All right, Khalid, like whatever you like." And he goes, No, you're going to help him. I'm like, "Cool." He's like, and this alderman was like, "Yeah, happy to have you come volunteer." And so I volunteered for him, like knocking on doors, hanging up stuff. So I was voluntold into politics, and every month the 49th Ward would have like a monthly meeting, and this one month, and there was a guest speaker every time, and this one month we had at this like 2-story Mexican restaurant. I'm like signing people in, and the meeting started, and this guy walks in, he's like, and I'm like, "You're late." I didn't look up from my paper. I'm like, "You're late." He goes, "Oh," I was like, "I know, I'm sorry, I'm the speaker." I'm like, "You're still late." And I'm like, "Just sign in." He's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm just heading out to speak." I'm like, "You still have to sign in." And
how old were you?
Like 16? No, 17. And I'm like, "You gotta sign in." And so he's like, we exchanged a couple words, and he's like, "What's your name?" And I put my hand in, I'm like, "Steve Oshana." He's like, "Barack Obama, nice to meet you."
Was there any part of you that thought this guy is one day going to become a president, and I just spoke to him like this?
At that particular moment where I'm like, "You're late, you got to sign in." No. But after I heard him speak at the ward meeting, and just talked to him a little bit afterwards and told him about my plans for college and things like that, and he would run for Senate later, and they asked me if I wanted to volunteer. And at the time, his like political director was a guy named Dan Showman,
former guest of the podcast.
Former guest, yeah. Dan is the man. Dan's awesome. But yeah, so like I was in college when he ran for Senate, and I was organizing on college campuses and proselytizing to him. So I worshipped Barack Obama. Like most Assyrians probably listening to this who knew me back then, like they made fun of me at the time that this guy's going nowhere, and I said, "Just you wait." I worshipped him, and I talked to him about the genocide so many times, and he's so like he felt so deeply about it and swore up and down he was gonna do everything he could to recognize it. When he was a senator, he was great on the issue. He was on the right side of it. When he didn't recognize it, like, I was devastated. I went through the denial phase where I'm like trying to say like, oh, well, he said Medzigan and it's the same thing. And I'm like trying to, justify it to myself. But when I that was kind of like when my cynicism set in politics, when the guy who I just 100% believed in with everything I had let me down so much. It was tough. And so, for me, I don't know, I always took it personally. And I one time told him he owed me, because my birthday is April 24th. And so it's on, the genocide memorial. And so I told him he owes me a better birthday present.
What did he say?
So he didn't think it was as funny as I did.
I wouldn't think so.
No.
Oh. Speaking of former President Barack Obama, when he was in office, there was a coalition of Assyrians from across the country who got to go to the White House and had a meeting with, I think, Ben Rhodes, right?
Well, yeah, we met with Ben and some other Andy Kim, who was the Iraq advisor, who's now a congressman in New Jersey. But yeah, Ben was the kind of main.
And he was the national security.
He was a deputy
deputy
national security advisor. Yeah, but Ben was kind of the. I was gonna say the Serrano Bergerac. I need to get my literary metaphors right.
References,
Yeah. So Ben was sort of the mind behind a lot of the foreign policy, national security policy.
For those who may not understand, the circle of the president of the United States, how close was Ben Rhodes to the president in terms of his work and
I mean, to put it in perspective, Ben was one of 3 people who had Oval Office privilege. Ben could walk into the Oval Office and talk to the president, and he was one of a handful of people who could do that. He was a very trusted advisor. Ben is also, he's a very cynical guy, but he's very just deeply passionate and caring. He has a very strong moral compass, but there is a deep cynicism. And actually, that's kind of why I like Ben, and I kind of got along with him, because we both kind of hated a lot of the trappings of Washington and some of the nonsense, because we were just very straightforward and do the right thing and kind of people. And Ben is an awesome guy. But yeah, he's about as high up as you get in terms of that kind of role.
Not his most recent book, but the book before that. I love that book. It's one of my favorite books that I read that year. And one of the reasons why I liked it was because he came across exactly the way you just described him, which is there's cynicism for sure, but he also believes that you should do everything you possibly can to move the world forward as it should be, and not just settle for the world as it is. Yeah, I've never read any of his books. Very good writer generally, but I've never read his books. I always thought he wanted to write fiction, if I'm not mistaken. I remember him mentioning fiction, but so yeah, I mean, that's pretty accurate. It's funny, he mentioned the Armenian genocide, not recognizing it in one of his books, and a friend of mine at the time was reading it, and she's like, he mentions you in his book, and I was so mad because I thought he was talking about me personally. What did he say? Because normally if someone's gonna write about you in their book, as a courtesy, they send you the excerpt so you can see it. And so when they're Ben Rhodes, I'm what did he say? What this? What a jerk. And I'm assumed it was bad, and it turned out it was just about the Armenian genocide, so it wasn't a personal slight. So about that meeting at the White House, how did it come about? How did you all decide who was going to attend? So basically, the Chaldeans and Assyrians were both working on trying to get a meeting with the White House. The Chaldeans in Detroit were working with a guy who's a close friend of mine, Dr. Jim Zogby, who's we're part of the Ethnic Council and the DNC together. So Jim was working. And DNC, I know you mentioned it, but I just wanted Democratic National Committee.
Yeah, and so Dr. Zogby was working with the Chaldeans on getting them a meeting with the White House. My uncle Raman, my late uncle Raman, rest his soul, in his similar way that he always does with me, when he voluntold me for stuff, he called me one day, and I knew everything. He always asked me for these crazy big things, and asked in a really casual way, I need you to talk to Obama about this. And because Raman was my uncle Raman was a guy who I could never say no to. He's the most amazing person I've ever known, and So he just called me. He's like, I need you to set up a meeting with the White House. I'm like, okay. He's like, we're going to be in DC like in 2 days. I'm like, okay. And he's like, it needs to be high level. I'm like, okay. And he's like, I need you to invite these people. I'm like, absolutely not. I'm like, but he's like, listen, it was they wanted it to be like a big thing. And I'm like, we can bring like 3 people. And, these were folks that I didn't really work with. And, I met with them and I explained to them, how sort of we're going to go about this. So I reached out to the White House to set that meeting up with Ben, and a colleague at the White House was like, hey, like, we're setting up this meeting with Jim Zogby and the Chaldeans. Like, would you guys mind doing this together? And Jim and I talked, and we're just like, yeah, like, of course we'll do it together. Like, no problem. That's actually how I met Nathan Kalasho. He was one of the guys who came, and that's how we met at the White House, July 31st, 2014. I always joke it's our anniversary. So like on July 31st, I sent him, happy anniversary. And
Nathan was also a former guest of the podcast.
Yeah.
There's another person in that photo who's also been on the podcast, and that's Martin Yamada. Is that right?
Yeah, Martin was one of the people that I had brought. My uncle wanted me to bring them because they were part of the Federation, and my uncle was part of the Federation. He wanted the Federation to be at the meeting. It was actually only them. I think it was just me, Martin, and his father, if I'm not mistaken. It's funny, like when I met Nathan, I never thought I'd talk to him again. Like, I literally never thought. And then I've been to his wedding and all his siblings' weddings, and we're super close friends. And literally never thought I'd see that guy again. And then we're just best friends.
So tell me about that. Tell me about that meeting. Like, what was there an ask?
There wasn't a great ask. I mean, there was, it was a lot of older Assyrian Chaldean guys. So it was a lot of, pounding the table and talking about how bad things are and how much help we need. And, I came prepared. So Dr. Zogby and I, we met beforehand and we're like, okay, these are the things we're going to ask for. And so we were prepared, but, a lot of it was to give the folks in the community a chance to talk to the White House and, an access that maybe otherwise didn't have. And so, but it's funny, I always tell people, when you're in meetings like that, they're sizing you up too, right? They're sizing you up as are you somebody who they can work with? And after that meeting, it was me and a couple of other people who had a second meeting with the White House. And then after that, it was just me and Dr. Zogby, and that was it. They didn't want to talk to anybody else.
What came of that meeting?
Nothing tangible. I mean, that was the first conversation we had. I mean, that was that was right when ISIS invaded. It was a week after that meeting that ISIS invaded the Nineveh plain, which the anniversary is today, actually. And that was sort of the first that kind of started the process, and that was where the dialogue opened. And later, when the Nineveh plain was invaded, that's when we started talking about airstrikes and military support and aid and things like that. But that was sort of where we first talked about aid. It's where we first talked about sort of direct support for Christians, and kind of the broader ambitions of our people.
Recently, we've seen an uptick in the number of Assyrians running for political office all over the country, which is a welcome change.
It's amazing.
And lots of them young people. How do you think this impacts the standing of Assyrians nationally in the United States or globally?
So I'm going to correct what you said.
Okay.
It's not that there's an uptick of Assyrians running. There's an uptick of Assyrians winning.
Okay, fair enough.
There's been Assyrians running for a long time, but they're winning now. I think it's great, and I love I think there's a blueprint for Assyrians running for office. 5 years ago, I put a post on Facebook. I'm like, are there any Assyrians who want to run for office? Let's do this. And a couple of people raised their hands, and 5 years later, we have in Illinois, I think 4 elected officials and a couple in other places. And so I think it's great. Collectively raises our profile, our power, our ability to get things done, large and small, locally, federally. I'm super proud of my cousin Mary, who I have to give a shout out to. She ran against an 18-year incumbent, first time running for office. Her father had passed away by then, wasn't there to like help her. Raman was like really involved in the community. She ran just the best campaign. It's like she was running for Congress. I mean, it was amazing. Got amazing endorsements. 4 people running in that field. So I have to say like that was one of the most impressive things I've seen an Assyrian do. And I'm biased naturally, but I think objectively, even the people who didn't support her came to me and said like, yeah, she did amazing. So it's, I'm biased, but there is objective science behind this.
There is currently a bill, I think, that I want to say the sponsor is Josh Harder from California.
Yeah.
My former home.
Okay.
No, he was never my congressman because he won recently after I'd moved here. But there's currently a bill that he sponsored, I think, like recognizing
Somali, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. I haven't, to be perfectly honest, like I wasn't part of crafting that bill. Mm-hmm. I had a couple of congressional offices reach out to me. It's I think anytime that there is recognition, like these resolutions that recognize things, it's important. We've done a number of these non-binding resolutions. We actually had a resolution on the floor in 2015 that was the first bill in Congress to ever mention Somali, to ever mention like the recognition of Somali. We ended up not being able to get it up to vote before the bill expired, and so we didn't bring it back. Those non-binding like resolutions are great. I think it's really important that there are other sort of groups and people, pursuing that. Josh is great. He actually is really close to the Assyrian community. He was raised by an Assyrian, like his neighbor who like...
She made him dolma.
Yeah.
I've heard the story.
He's cool.
Him.
No, I like Josh. Like it's funny, like there was an Assyrian who was working for him when he was running, and I just remember getting like a call on my cell phone, and it was Josh, and he was like, I'm running for office. Like, do you have any advice? I'm like, yep. I got you, man. Like, here's everything you need to know about Assyrians, and because he just wanted to kind of know like what are the issues in Washington that are affecting Assyrians that he can be aware of. And I didn't think he'd win.
He got reelected.
Yeah, well, reelection,
just barely.
He barely squeaked by Jeff Denham, who's a good guy. I like Jeff. He was pretty good to us.
He was pretty I've seen him at various Assyrian functions and stuff. He had good relationships.
Yeah, he did, and so like it was a good year for Dems. I mean, but yeah, Josh ran a great campaign. I didn't think he was going to win. The Democratic wave was a little bit stronger than I expected it to be.
That was in 2018, the first time, right?
Yes.
And then 2020 he got reelected. I was in Turlock. I think it was like a Christmas or Easter, but he spoke in Turlock, and I went and listened to him talk, which is where I heard him talk about his neighbor who made him dolma.
Yeah.
All right, I know you got to get to a wedding, so I've got a lightning round about DC.
Let's go.
Mainly because I want to visit again, and so I need to like take notes. So
I will caveat this by saying like I think DC is the most amazing place in the world. It's my favorite city in America. I fall in love with it every single day. So I love talking about DC. So let's get the.
All right, let's go. Favorite museum?
Oh, good question. Air and Space.
Oh, I love that one. Yeah, my husband's giving a thumbs up because we love that one. Favorite monument, but here's the thing. I need a daytime one and a nighttime one.
Okay. Daytime, Jefferson Memorial.
Okay.
Nighttime, World War II Memorial.
Oh. Yeah. Okay. You didn't mention the ones I thought you would mention.
Lincoln?
I love the Lincoln Memorial. And then the MLK one.
It's good, also. Yeah. It's very powerful.
Anyway, sorry, this is the lightning round where I'm supposed to ask you questions.
No, let's do it.
Okay, so now that you've talked about wanting to be a chef, favorite restaurant?
In DC?
Yes.
Okay, I always have to caveat this.
Okay.
Because, favorite restaurant, is it, Michelin star restaurant? Is it hole in the wall fast? What are we talking about?
Okay, let's do a Michelin star and a hole in the wall.
Okay. Michelin star... Oh, that's a good question. I really like the Plume at the Jefferson Hotel. It's a super old school, like European fine dining restaurant. It's so old school, like more like a little bit more casual but upscale one. There's a lot of those. Let's see. I'm gonna come back to that one because there's so many. Rasika is probably one of my favorite restaurants. It's an Indian restaurant. I really like Rasika. Hole in the wall places. Too many good ones. They're mostly in the suburbs. A lot of them closed down with gentrification. Let's see. There's a great it's not a hole in the wall per se, but it's a place called Donburi in Adams Morgan, and they make donburi, which is like a Japanese rice bowl thing. Super good. It's like $10. It's just like a counter. There's nothing else there. I love that place. So many good ethnic restaurants, just like random Thai restaurants in the suburbs. There's a great Vietnamese place called Four Sisters. It's awesome. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff there.
All right. And then since you worked as a bartender, favorite bar?
Favorite bar. Oh man. Probably the Quill at the Jefferson Hotel. I think that's like the, caveat. I actually tended bar there, so I have a bit of a bias there. I love that hotel. It's just such an old school, kind of cool DC hotel, very quiet. I take clients there and stuff now, and it's I still love going back there.
Favorite political event that you were happy to witness from DC?
The staff inaugural ball for President Obama's second inauguration. It was really cool. I wasn't staff. I didn't work at the White House, but they gave me tickets, which was super neat. And I saw Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett perform in a really kind of intimate setting. It was super cool. That was a lot of fun.
Favorite DC tradition?
Cherry Blossom Festival. Ooh. It's a little touristy, but I love it.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's so I buy into it every year with the selfies and I can't and I've seen it every year, and I love going out and biking or driving around in a convertible or something. It's just I love the cherry. It's such a pretty thing that just comes around once a year. It's there for a fleeting moment. I think cherry blossoms are really special.
When we were in DC, we walked from we walked all the way to the MLK monument, and then walked to Roosevelt, and then walked all the way to the Jefferson monument. But there's this great picture that I see every year around the Cherry Blossom Festival where it's the cherry blossom, but you see the Jefferson Monument on the other side. I have 20
pictures on my phone from every year. Yeah, I cannot help myself. I take pensive photos of the reflecting pool. I can't help. Of course. I love the city so much, and I can't stop taking pictures of it.
I totally understand. I lived in San Francisco, and I had a bazillion photos of the Golden Gate Bridge, even though I saw it every day.
San Francisco is probably the second best city in America, tied with Seattle. It's DC, San Francisco, Seattle, in my opinion.
I've never been to Seattle, but I hear great things.
Really awesome place. Yeah. Really awesome.
I'm sure I would like it. One final question we always ask all of our guests is if you could say one thing to all of the Assyrians listening from all over the world, what would you say?
Oh my God. Can I say something? I want to okay, so what I would want to say is going to upset a lot of people. But so maybe I'll say move out of your parents' house. That's probably my, honestly, the advice I used to give people is just make sure you're successful at whatever you do, right? There's this idea that everyone wants to go help the Assyrian community and be an activist. If you're not good at your profession, if you're not successful, you're of no use to the community. It doesn't matter what you do. You could be a good actor, you can be a good bartender. I don't care what you do. Be good at it, be successful. You're going to be able to help them. But I do, I do think one of the things that's important for our community is to sort of expand our horizons and our minds a little bit. And I don't think being 30 living with your parents in Skokie is the way to do that. I think as an adult you need to go see the world and travel and be on your own and come into yourself as a person. That's the one thing I would love to sort of see more of is Assyrians embracing their individuality, which a lot of them do, but I think as a whole we still are very traditional. Like, you don't leave until you get married, and so I'm dreading when this airs. I'm gonna have so many like parents just like coming at me like marauders for saying that. But I think we gotta, like, you know, go find yourself. Like, and if you're in your 20s, you're in college, like go experience the college life, you know, like go live on campus, go live somewhere else, study abroad, do these things, like just find what drives you as a person. And I think, like, when you sort of step out of the very tight-knit and an amazing sort of environment that we have in our community, it is an amazing thing. But when you step out of that, you probably find that you're a very different person than you had anticipated. And I love, like, when I see these Assyrians like pursue their individuality. Like, one of my favorite people is Benil Dariush. I love Benil, and I love him as a fighter and just as a person. I just, he like went out and did this thing that was not a lot of people do, and his parents were like, go to medical school, and he's like, I want to punch people in the face. And there's just a lot of cool, and there's a lot of cool artists nowadays. I just love seeing some of this stuff that's being produced in our community, and I just think the best way to do that is explore your individuality. And I guess that's the way I put it was too succinct to say move out of your parents' house, but move out of your parents' house.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for making the time.
My pleasure.
It was nice to connect with you here in Michigan. I hope to see you in DC soon. You got
to come visit. DC is amazing. I love it. I'm giving my pitch. I should be getting like a royalty from like the DC Tourism Board for this, because but it's an amazing city. Can't wait. We'll introduce you to the small community we have there. They're all brilliant and amazing, and you're gonna love it, I think, as much as I do.
That's it for this week. Thanks for tuning in. We will be back next week with a brand new episode. Don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts, and share this episode and others with everyone you know. See you next Tuesday.